the lowlands of western Slovakia. They're composed of extensive areas of agricultural land with meadows, woods, coverts and pastures. This is the landscape in which one of the Slovakia's most precious creatures lives, the Sacred Falcon. This is the largest species of falcon resting in Central Europe. Its wingspan can reach up to 130 centimeters. The females are larger than the males, and the difference is visible. Researching the origin of its name takes us way back to ancient times. The Arabic word sucker means falcon, but the Slovak name Rároch reminds us of some ancient common Slavic word, derived from the high-pitched greeting or warning cry of these birds. The first mention of sacred falcons nesting in the area of Slovakia dates from the late 19th century, and links then with Devin Castle, which rears up today above a suburb of Bratislava. The beginnings of systematic monitoring, or regular observing of nesting pairs, date from around the year 1979. At that time we knew of 8 pairs in West and 2 pairs in Eastern Slovakia. The godfather of the Sacred Falcon in Western Slovakia for nearly 40 years is internationally and knowledge expert and chairman of the NGO Raptor Protection of Slovakia, Jozef Falco. In the East, most of the credit for its protection goes to 2 people, Jozef Mihok and Jan Lipták. It is primarily thanks to these 3 men and their selfless work that this rare species of falcon has survived in this country. In the early 1990s, when the West Slovakian population still nested in the forest of Little Carpathians, it was threatened with complete extinction. The reason for this was nest robbery, as thieves plundered every nest for the eggs. In 1990 we launched the Falco Project, which meant that we guarded the nests 7 days, 24 hours, in all weathers and quite tough conditions, from March until the end of June. Hundreds of students took part in the project. And there was such pressure from the nest robbers that we even had to wind barbed wire around the trunks of the nesting trees, so that the thieves had no chance. We really chose the right approach, because we kept all 5 nests in Little Carpathians safe that year, with young falcons flying successfully from each of them. That was our objective. Just like all falcons, seekers never actually build their own nests. In natural conditions, they make use of other birds' old nests, most of them those of other raptors, ravens or herons. The presence of sakers in the original countryside was therefore indirectly dependent on the incidence of those species. In the past they favored nesting in trees. And at that present time, human intervention is the most significant factor. Affecting not just the landscape, but also the quality and functionality of its ecosystems. 20 years ago, the slopes of the Little Carpathians were covered in these forests. Today, we can see only the miserable remains of the original woods. The Little Carpathians used to be my favorite hills, and I spent most of my time there. The beech woods were so wonderful, so fragrant. There were springs and streams and life just gargled everywhere. But the trees started disappearing, mainly in the old beeches where the nests were, and then they went at such a rate that in the end there were no nesting places left. And the Sacred Falcons had nowhere to nest. We tried to save something, of course, and we went to the Forestry Administration and various offices, but commercial interests were more important. So the Sacres lost their nesting conditions, and we had to find another way of helping them. Josef Hauko began setting up wicker supports around the Little Carpathians as substitutes for old nests, and then wooden nesting boxes as well, which were safer with regard to threats from bad weather and predators. The falcons' preferred hunting grounds also underwent massive change. Collective farming, merging of fields, the end of traditional land management and subsequent degradation of pastures, increasing use of chemicals and large-scale production in agriculture, all combined to cause radical transformation on the countryside. The Sacred Falcon's favorite prey, the ground squirrel and field hamster, were forced out of their natural habitat together with many other species. In the 1990s, there was still plenty of ground squirrel habitats here in the east, and Sacres used to come to the lowlands for the squirrels. But then increasingly often, we found squirrel fields ploughed up. Nobody cared about them. Michal Ambros is a researcher who studies small ground-living mammals. As much as 90% of ground squirrel habitat in Slovakia has disappeared. In the 1950s, the area of incidence of this species was practically continuous. Currently, it has dwindled into just a few isolated localities, and this isolated distribution is a potential cause of the extinction of most or all of the ground squirrel population in Slovakia. The average distance from the nest, which the falcons had to travel for their preferred food, was constantly increasing. The parents had to leave their young in the nest and exposed to danger for too long. A way out of this situation might be a shift in the natural nesting sites into the lowlands, that is, into the hunting grounds themselves. But there's another problem here, which is the lack of suitable nests. The reason for this is intensive disturbance and persecution of various bird species whose old nests the falcons tend to use. Shooting is particularly disturbing for them. The birds do not feel safe in the lowlands, and they rarely nest here. A solution was urgently required. We were left with no other option than to go to the hunting grounds and look for other possibilities there. The best idea we came up with was to install nesting boxes there. They were right amidst the hunting areas, so there was no loss of energy for the falcons. They could feel their young and they could watch their nest while hunting as well. This was the best way to help them. In 1991, we got the first permission from the power supply company to install nesting boxes on electricity pylons. This idea really paid off, and the very next year we had the first pair nesting in one. So from 1994 onwards, wooden nesting boxes started being installed in agricultural areas, compensating for the lack of natural nests. Areas were chosen in the west and east of the country, which had significant supply of food. Over the next 16 years, more than 300 boxes were put up in this way. So how did the falcons react? The Sacres reacted very quickly, and in the course of about 7 years, the population moved into the boxes. After resettling, the Sacres' access to food sources improved as well, because the urban pigeons gradually became their predominant prey. The nesting success rate also increased in terms of the numbers of successfully reared young. because their new nesting conditions reduced the chances of attack by predators such as pine martens or hawks. The amount of human disturbance was reduced as well. From 2007 onwards, the wooden boxes were progressively replaced with aluminum ones, which are substantially more durable. The standpoint of the management of the Slovakian electricity transmission network is presented by Norbert Deák. We have been working together with the Raptor Protection of Slovakia NGO for more than 20 years now, and we are very pleased that our companies contributed to the protection of such a rare species as the Sacred Falcon. In addition to helping with creating safe nesting opportunities for these birds of prey, in planning our work we also bear in mind that they must not be disturbed during the nesting period. We support educational and promotional activities in the field of nature conservation so that this topic takes deeper root in public awareness. Nesting by sacred falcons in Slovakia has only ever been recorded in the western and eastern part of the country, where the majority of the falcon population lives. They have never been found nesting in central Slovakia. I reckon they're standing right. The importance of activities protecting the sacred falcon is explained by the executive director of the Raptor Protection of Slovakia NGO, Lucia Dojčová. Our falcon population is closely linked with the Hungarian one, and together they actually form more than 80% of the whole population in the EU countries. For this reason, it's vital to protect the sacred falcon in this area. In 2005, when the joint project started being prepared, the experts knew of just 22 pairs of sacred falcon nesting in the whole of Slovakia. The objective was to increase and stabilize this fragile population in Slovakia. We have many years of experience and very good cooperation with our Hungarian colleagues. In fact, they were the ones who taught us how to fit sacred falcons with transmitters, for example. In Slovakia, we have fitted solar-powered 22-gram GPS transmitters to 9 sacred females, because they are larger and heavier than the males. We only fitted them to the young because, in contrast to the adults, they migrate for the winter months. These results were groundbreaking, providing a mass of information about the places the falcons chose for resting on their travels, the threats they had to face, and the routes they took. In 2008, we were all surprised by a female falcon named Viera, who wintered as far away as Africa. It was a proper shock for me. That time Viera flew 3,000 kilometers right over the Mediterranean and ended up in Nigeria. One of the most serious dangers for birds is the threat of electrocution by parts of the electricity pylons on which they like to rest and watch out for their prey. Upon landing on them, the birds are either killed outright or seriously injured by contact with the electric current. The results of satellite telemetry themselves confirmed that electrocution is the primary reason for the high fatality rate among young sacred falcons along their migration routes. Fortunately, Slovakia sets an example for the rest of the world in terms of the responsible approach for the electricity companies here towards this problem. Various protective components are being installed on dangerous pylons, designed as it happens by experts from the Raptor Protection of Slovakia NGO. In many places, dangerous parts have been replaced with new ones which eliminate the threat of the birds. Every day hundreds of pylons are adopted ecologically, and on a national scale this protects thousands of birds every year. How the management of the West Slovakian power company view the issue is presented by Jan Orlovský. For power companies, ecological adaptation means building protective features into high-tension electricity pylons. Members of our staff are happy to go and help or to take part in voluntary activities organized by RPS. It was their very enthusiasm and personal commitment which convinced us that this activity makes sense. Today they help to make life in the country as rich as possible in terms of biodiversity as well. Mutual communication and coexistence make us richer and better people. Nature conservationists are now also focusing their efforts in increasing the variety of species and restoring to the countryside the one-time prey of sacred falcons, the ground squirrel. Fortunately, there still exist farmers who manage their land in accord with natural principles and are inclined to cooperate in the renovation of disturbed biotopes. One of those is Ľubomír Tomek.
Nás motivuje tak, už jak jsem raz povedal, ta radost z toho, no.
We are not motivated by any pleasure at going into a meadow and not seeing a single beetle or mouse, because the countryside is dead. But when you spot ground squirrels peeping out of their burrows, running from hole to hole, and birds of prey overhead which need the squirrels to stay alive, for us that's beautiful. Without animals, the countryside is dead. And if we don't help nature, there won't be any animals at all. Hundreds of ground squirrels are finding new homes in the protected bird territories of the Little Carpathians, Záhorské Pomoravia and Muránske Plateau, where they are transferred to places where they still thrive. For better monitoring, each of them is fitted with a microchip before being released in their new habitat. It's important to create suitable conditions for the ground squirrels so that they do well in the new localities. Renewal of the ground squirrel population has for many years been the focus of attention for Erwin Happel. What's important for ground squirrels is having short grass cover. We chose this locality because it's pasture land and it's traditionally always been properly grazed, so there's always been very short grass the whole year round. So it's a very suitable biotope for ground squirrels. As soon as the grass gets too thick, it's often very damp. Then the squirrels can get various skin diseases. And they're nervous too, because they can't see each other, so they can't warn each other of danger, and they become easy prey for predator birds or animals. Experts from RPS are well aware of the key role of agriculture and forestry in the landscape forming process. This topic is intensively studied by Boris Maderic. From the global point of view, intensive agriculture is one of the most significant threats to biodiversity. This negative influence can be seen here in Slovakia too, above all in lowland areas where farming is much more intensive and aggressive compared with the highland areas. For this reason, we focus on our work on creating and promoting the sort of instruments which motivate farmers to manage the land more sparingly, to use less chemicals, to leave bushes growing untouched in the countryside, and even encourage their growth outside of woodland, thereby creating places for various species of animals and plants to grow. Agro-environmental schemes are an example of this sort of instrument. Another challenge for agriculture here in Slovakia is permanently sustainable farming, which is an approach for farming that satisfies people's economic interests but also protects biodiversity at the same time. As if this was not enough already, at the present time sacred falcons are still the victims of illegal activity. Since 2004, at least 17 of these rare raptors have been killed, wounded or otherwise damaged as a result of shooting, poisoning, trapping, or illegal caging. Regarding the available information, however, we can unfortunately assume that the real number of victims is much higher, because only a small percentage of bird-killing cases is ever dealt with. In 2009, the public in Slovakia and abroad were shocked by the case of mass killing of 22 birds representing various species of raptor which were found poisoned near Jaslovské Bohunice. Among the victims were 2 pairs of precious sacred falcons. Conservationists work intensively in cooperation with the police, and volunteers from all over Slovakia are involved in uncovering illegal activity targeting birds of prey. Increasingly often, they make use of modern means of crime fighting such as video cameras, photo traps, or data loggers, which also provide valuable insights into the feeding and biological regimes of falcons. Injured or otherwise disabled animals require the arrangement of specialist care. Injuries occur as a result of illegal human activity, contact with electric current, or collisions with an obstacle in flight. This care center for injured animals is run by Tibor Schneider.
Táto voliera bola postavená v rámci projektu na záchranu sokola rároha.
This aviary was built as part of the Sacred Falcon Preservation Project. Of course, we also use it for getting other birds back into flight, most frequently raptors. As far as injuries are concerned, apart from the common ones due to collisions with vehicles, there is a notable proportion caused by firearms. I cannot understand how someone in this day and age can shoot at any bird of prey, let alone a sacred falcon, when the whole European Union is making no small effort to preserve this species. We have several photographs clearly showing shotgun wounds. Serious and knowledgeable hunters recognize that sacres belong in the wild just like any other animal species, and that by preying on ground squirrels, common hamsters, field voles or urban pigeons, they are irreplaceable in the ecosystem. Unfortunately, this picture proves once again that not everyone deserves the right to use a gun. In 2014, only 31 pairs of sacred falcon nested in Slovakia. This small population is extremely fragile and vulnerable. Incorrect application of chemicals, unfavorable weather conditions, or some vicious act could have fatal consequences for the whole species, and possibly even cause its complete disappearance from our countryside. For this reason alone, this impressive raptor deserves extraordinary attention and all of our efforts for its preservation. Nowadays there are several enthusiasts who are devoting themselves to preserving the sacred falcon, and their work is indispensable. They are led by a unique person who has given his whole life to nature conservation and who hopes that one day somebody will continue with the demanding but very noble mission to save the sacred falcon, and with the same zeal that he has brought to the mission for the past 30 years or more. I've been tracking sacred falcons for nearly 40 years now. I've known everyone of their nests, and I've passed through every valley they have nested in. I've been through very many different situations and experiences with these birds of prey, and I think they should remain a permanent feature of nature in the country for many generations to come. The sacred falcon is a unique and wonderful bird.